Located in the Araratian kingdom, Mush was ruled by the Mamikonians as early as the 4th century. Founded in the 4th century by Saint Gregory the Illuminator, Surpkarabet Monastery was one of the oldest monasteries in Armenia and was a stronghold of the Mamikonians. Today what remains of the monastery is only a few shapeless ruins and many carved stones and khachkars which have been used as building materials by the local residents and are often found in the walls of homes and structures. Surpkarabet Monastery was one of the 3 most important sites for Armenian Christian pilgrimage and among the richest, most ancient institutions in Ottoman Armenia. Today, the wealth and livelihood of the monastery has disappeared. After the destruction of the Armenians in the Armenian Genocide, Surpkarabet ceased to exist, not only as a spiritual center, but also as an architectural monument. The monastery was blown up by the Turkish army under the Turkish government's policy of cultural genocide of Armenian monuments in Turkey. Kevork Çavuş was a legendary fedai whose main goal was to defend Armenian peasantry in the face of harassment by marauding Turks and Kurds. Çavuş's extraordinary daring and valor inspired his men as he led the resistance in the region of Darun Sasun from 1904 until 1907. Kevork Çavuş was critically wounded on May 25, 1907, during a large firefight with the Ottoman army in Sulukh Mush. 2 days later, his body was found under Murat Bridge. Erzurum was a major deportation center during the Armenian Genocide in 1915. Prior to the war, the city had a vibrant Armenian community with numerous schools and businesses. But by the time the Russians entered in 1916, barely 100 Armenians were left alive, out of a pre-war population of 20,000. It is estimated that approximately 90% of the Armenians of Erzurum province had perished. Van was the center of the Armenian kingdom of Ararat from about 1000 BC and the Armenian kingdom of Vaspurakan in the Middle Ages. Lake Van is a saline and soda lake, receiving water from numerous small streams that descend from the surrounding mountains. According to legend, the 8th century ruler Arageretsik's dead body was laid here by Queen Shamiram, with hopes of reviving him through the sacred powers of the licking dogs called Arales. The name Muradi comes from Murat, king of Ottomans, who stayed near the waterfalls during the Baghdad Wars. Van's location at the foot of a great isolated rock made it a natural fortress. Varakavank was a prominent Armenian monastery founded in the 11th century on the slopes of Mount Varak, east of the city of Van. It was the richest and best-known monastery of Vaspurakan and the seat of the Archbishop of the Armenian Apostolic Church in Van. In the 3rd century, Surprepsime buried a piece of the cross upon which Christ was crucified on Mount Varak. Centuries later, in 650 AD, a monk named Todik had a dream of a church on Mount Varak with 12 pillars in the center of which was a radiant cross. The cross then came to rest over the altar of the monastery of Varak, where Todik discovered the cross relic. But on April 30th, 1915, the Turkish army destroyed the monastery during the siege of Van as part of the Armenian Genocide. Van was spared the massacres of 1895 when the Ottomans were informed that the 3 political Armenian parties were preparing for a joint defensive. And when in 1915, the Armenians were again scheduled for extermination, the Van Armenians armed themselves, and for almost a month, a bare 300 freedom fighters successfully held off the Turkish army until the Russian forces entered the city. That led to a massive retreat by the Turks. But unfortunately, when the Russians left, the Turks returned and completed their mission. The city of Van is one of the very oldest in Armenia, founded by the Urartians as their new capital Tushbas in the 9th century BC. Van was one of the most Europeanized and cultivated towns in Armenia. However, today, Turks still have not settled in the Van region, as most of the residents are Kurdish. In an interview to the Armenian Weekly, the governor of Van said that the restoration of Surkhaç Church was carried out by the Ministry of Culture and Tourism of Turkey. It will become a museum, with a church service allowed only once a year.
My mother was from Van, that's why I'm here today. My father was a genocide survivor, so it's a very important day for us as Armenians.
It was promoted as goodwill towards the Armenians next door, as well as the diaspora. However, most believe it was cheap propaganda that fell well short of its goal. And considering the low turnout for the event and endless criticisms, the Turkish government considers it a major failure in gaining acceptance from the West.